All right, I'm just gonna share my screen. Yeah, all right. All right, that's the one. All right, so I did time myself, so hopefully I'll stick to time. So welcome to my presentation. I've called it the CAE Bubble Conference presentation because I couldn't think of a title. So I decided to be quite literal. I do want to make a note before I do start that I am writing about pretty difficult content, and I will make mention of things such as trauma, mental illness, eating disorders and self-harm. I've done my best to try and balance the needs of the narrative with also ensuring that I don't go too much over the top or try and reach for imagery or descriptions that are kind of upsetting for the sake of being shocking for engagement. But do please note that that is part of the content, so feel free to step out if you need to or turn your camera off. That's entirely fine and very understandable. I know I've been in situations where I've been listening to presentations and I find it quite difficult sometimes. I'm okay because I'm in control, so. All right, so to begin properly, I would just like to make an acknowledgement of country and to acknowledge that I meet with you today on the unceded country of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and that I recognise that the peoples of the Kulin Nation maintain ongoing connection to this country, culturally, spiritually, linguistically and intellectually, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present and future. I'd also like to acknowledge the land I present from today was never ceded and is therefore stolen land, and that this land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. All right, so to begin, I would like to start with this quotation from Sophie Tomas, who writes about trauma and traumatic memory and the difficulty of trying to write about traumatic memory. And she writes, "I have lost trust in my memories and witnessing. My experiences have slipped out of my available vocabulary of fact, and I, as a testifying agent, have come unglued." And then I've just got this picture here for the presentation because sometimes when we're listening to difficult things, it can be nice to have something beautiful to look at. And this was the closest thing I got to bubbles. All right. In the above quotation, Tomas describes the destabilising nature of traumatic memory, arguing that to impose narrative order and linear sense onto the sticky, messy pointlessness of trauma is to risk making simple, sensible stories from complexity. Trauma, she argues, is not simple. It is traumatic precisely because it doesn't make sense. In this paper, I explore this paradox, juxtaposing the drive for narrative sense and recognisability with the impossibility of capturing that which Balla, drawing on the work of CAE, describes as the unrepresentability of experience that exists beyond the bounds of language. Language, Tomas argues, has limits. It binds even as it enables. In writing about my own experiences of mental illness and trauma, I too have found myself bumping up against these self-same limits of language. Yet, like Tomas, I have also found myself stubbornly returning to language, turning over words like stones in the hopes of unpicking the grey trouble inside my head. And I am troubled. On the one hand, I reject the modernist imposition of linearity, the demand for the messy complexity of human experience to be made ordered. To think in terms of singular truth is an intellectual impossibility. I have read too much Judith Butler for a start. However, in the context of trying to make sense, that word again, sense, of my own experiences of mental illness, trauma and help seeking, I cannot deny a genuine longing, a small child wanting of linearity and easy sense making to give in to the quest for intelligibility and recognisability and the all too human need to be understood. In the context of mental illness and trauma, where relief and care is so often dependent on communication with another, whether that be within the confines of therapy or personal relationships, to be recognisable is about survival. As Butler argues, to be a survivable subject is to be rendered recognisable within language, a survivability that is fundamentally dependent on the recognition of the other. The question I raise in this paper is, what does it do when the need for speakability and language, for recognisability, rubs up against the unrepresentability of that which needs to be spoken? How do I begin to pin language to experience when I cannot reach the words? The following narrative is my attempt to balance these seemingly opposing priorities through a series of short vignettes, strung together and out of time, a series of bubble moments, at once discrete and yet connected. The below translation is my best attempt at balancing what Tomas defines as narrative containment with the messy chaos of traumatic memory. I also set my story against a common therapeutic narrative thread, one in which recovery is a linear process marked by crisis, but inevitably progressing towards resolution. It is a story I've held close for years, hoping that if I could only understand the muck within my own mind, I will be able, as Tomas describes, to sort myself and my experience into orderly taxonomies in my quest for mastery. While I do not reject the possibility of living better, of living in ways without so many sharp edges, I've come to recognise that recovery, as I've always imagined it, is itself a beautiful fiction. Maladaptive coping strategies. My mother once told me that everyone has a devil on their shoulder. Mine nips at the back of my neck, sharp teeth. In quiet moments, I trace my scars with my fingertips, following the divots of flesh, the lines and bumps, the circles burnt into skin by the tips of cigarettes. I forget whole territories, ankles, shins, thighs, the comforting wetness of bloodied skin against the polyester blend of a cheap black skirt. When blood dries on black, nobody can see. It is wrong that I'm wistful, missing the scent of antiseptic and familiar press of too tight cotton wound about aching wrists, proof of something. Can we play the game? The boy says, begs. I don't want to. I run, but I'm already resigned. Once I saw him pull beads off flies. I know I'll give in. This is what girls do. Recovery. Blood drops on the toe of my boot, brightest red smudge against black. The train is coming and I do not have time to clean up. Palm over thigh, I hold cloth against skin. Thankful that I'm wearing black, hopeful that no one will look too closely at the red cape and the beds of my nails, outlining the wells of my fingertips. Sitting down, I'm careful not to get blood on the seat. In a forest in Germany near a little town where I've been sent for a school exchange, I bend over, a little too full. I throw up into the dirt. It is an accident. The next time I try, it is not. Maladaptive coping strategies. Walking up from the tram stop towards university campus, I catch my reflection in the gleaming windows of two shiny buildings. Am I fat? I'm fat. I can see it, the roll of flab over the top of my skirt, too much for my arms. At school, a boy who later tried to kill himself when we were teenagers threw tennis balls. He had a mean aim. You're too fat to play, he'd yell. I reject the patriarchy, but I agree. I'm too fat to play. Maladaptive coping strategies. I drink juice, eat only fruit. My mother makes dinner and the muscles of my stomach follow orders. I clog the pipes and scoop undigested pasta and paleo with strings from the sink into the bin. Spit sticking to my fingers. Recovery. Panic makes me rapid. Heartbeat, thoughts rushed. My stomach dips like a misstep and I remind myself that I'm sitting down. I am home. I'm safe. On the other end of the phone, the voice insists I describe what I'm feeling. I can't. My words disappear like schools of tiny fish disturbed by a finger. The voice insists. I don't know. The voice insists. I'm not allowed to not know. The voice insists. I'm going to get into trouble. I don't know. The voice feels like a stranger has licked the back of my neck. I want to be clean. I want to hang up, but I don't know how to say no. I say nothing. History. The room is red and small and hot and close. The woman leans over her desk, insisting. Why are you so angry? I'm not. She circles, the words poking and prodding until I am choked with a child's throat-tightening sense of injustice. I have no words. I only know I'm tired of people throwing rocks, but I'm sick of being the thing that does not fit. I cry and she is pleased by my tears. I have broken like a boil being lensed. She says that she will calm me down. Just get up on this, patting a too-high massage table, insisting that I clamber up. Now, take your top off. I am 13. I do not want to. She insists. Switching on a heat lamp that glows red, I lie down. I pretend that this is fine. Recovery. The feeling grips me like grief. I'm bent over, breathing hard enough to feel my ribs flare, hands on my head as I repress the urge to keen. Would if I didn't live so close to others. Instead, I chant a mantra. Stop it, stop it, Stop it. I smashed the flat of my palm and the side of my head, just above the temple in a sharp, hard rhythm, until my mind rings and the grief retreats like a wave creeping back from shore. I stand, wipe a fist across my eyes and slap each cheek hard. Get it the fuck together. I don't have time for your bullshit. Recovery. She watches as I tear myself into something else, a thing I can't take back. Touching my shoulder, a gentle pressure of palm on cloth. For kindness, I don't know how to wear. Don't understand why. She isn't worried about contamination, but I'll seep like grimy washing water into places that are supposed to stay clean. But she isn't. And I tuck it away, a little folded note of possibility that things might be different. Telling these moments feels like I am trying to stitch together a coherent whole when all I have is scraps. One of the theme of this conference, I'm trying to reach for bubble metaphors, a bubble for each snippet of memory, perhaps bursting under the lightest touch of the fingertip of attention. Memory as bubble moments strung together like cheap Chinese lanterns, bought from the $2 shop, ready to be strung haphazardly along a metaphorical fence. What I'm really left with is remnants. Damp patch after the bubble has burst. I find I have not answered my question, the central provocation of this paper. I still don't know what the cost is. What is lost in speakability and unrepresentability are forced to coexist in trouble and closeness. But perhaps I'm asking the wrong question. Language as a constitutive force is ultimately creative, and I know that in the stringing together of these bubble moments, however burst, however fragile, I'm finding myself able to finally write a narrative I can own. To make sense, despite the chaos and empty spaces of mystery and memory, trying as I am to remember that which I did not know I had forgotten. I wonder if there's a space for thinking through stories of trauma and memory and multiplicity, accepting that to get at and translate a singular truth of traumatic experience is a false promise, and one not worth chasing, despite what conventional recovery narratives might demand. I'm finding this inspiration in the work of writers such as Lucia Osmond Crawley and her recent work, My Body Keeps Your Secrets, in which she explores the consequences of trauma on bodies without pulling together neat and consoling conclusions. I return again to the constitutive and creative force of language, imagining that I can draw on stories to do the work at a time at which it is needed, in the form in which it is required. Words working away like tools that I can pick up or put down depending on the job at hand, finding ways to tell that bend the requirements of the context without conceptualizing these bendings as sacrifice of truth. Instead, I'm simply telling differently, considering my audience and the purpose of the telling. This is possible if I accept multiplicity not only in stories but in experience, accepting that Butler and Davies and Whedon have so convincingly illustrated that words of language and the pauses in between create possibility, and that when language fails, the body speaks, even when I don't want it. I would like to finish as I began, with a return to the quote from Sophie Tanas, with writing a trauma, memory, narrative, recovery I found so influential in my own thinking, writing, and work. I've lost trust in my memories and witnessing. My experiences have slipped out of my available vocabulary of fact, and I, as a testifying agent, have come unmoved.
Thank you, Michelle, so much for that beautiful work. I appreciate you sharing that and the vulnerabilities required in doing so. So thanks very much. If it's all right with everyone, maybe I'd recommend we'll move to the next presentation and then we'll save our time for questions at the end. Is that all right with you, Michelle? All right. But do put those love messages in the chat or use your emoticons. And then we'll move to Julie Peters.
Hi, I'm just I've just got a little smidge of prep to do, and I bought a prop.
Oh, perfect, Julie. How perfect is that?
There you go. And I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm coming to you from the traditional lands of the Yalkut William clan, the river people of the Boon Wurrung, lands that were never ceded. And I'd like to acknowledge Indigenous elders past, present and emerging, people who very successfully tended their great estate. I'd also like to acknowledge LGBT elders, past, present, and emerging. Now, turns out I feel I'm in a period of transition at the moment, having finished my PhD and the book of the thesis, and I'm committed to a project with the ABC until Easter. But I'm very excited about where to next, where the flow will take me. This piece is a stream of consciousness about possibilities. Since I put the abstract in, I've called it Bubble, Pop and Burst, ephemeral all is. There is a level at which I don't believe in the ephemeral. I mean, I know it is, life is, the social world is. Physicists tell us that even stars die, and that when Sol grows to be a red giant, planet Earth will be sucked into it. Now that is extreme climate change. Bursts out of nowhere, or so it seems, the universe, light, gravity, matter, dark matter, life, gooey, beautiful, streamy slime moles. Who invented the notochord, the backbone? What a great idea for swimming, standing. But was it invented, created, or self-burst? Burst from the primordial sentience? What? Sentience from rocks and algae? It seems I'm sentient. I thought this. Or did the thought create me? The yummy micro-ecosystem of my sourdough? Or did it simply burst from dough gone sour? Did God create humankind and the rest, of course? Or did we create God? Logically, I believe I'm going to die. In fact, I'm thinking I should buy a funeral plot, one with a view. But emotionally, I don't really face it. We build little empires in work, house, accumulate wealth, a good library. We can't take it with us, they say. It's an old African saying. You should farm as if you're going to live forever and live as if you're going to die tomorrow. Seems a sensible work-life balance, a creative tension between life and death. That's an okay motto, but it doesn't answer the big existential question. Why the fuck are we here? For many humans, the answer is easy. We've been put on Earth as a test. If we do well, we'll be reincarnated higher up the enlightenment chain, or others believe we'll be reunited with God. But what if the rapture has already happened and we're the ones left? 1,000 years of weeping, gnashing of teeth, plagues of locusts. Or is that just climate change in the latest pandemic? The thing is, we need a plan for what to do day to day, next week. Luckily, I get to eat. Necessity for life. I'm mostly healthy and have some agency. Then I'm left so hungry for ideas, hungry for beauty, hungry for story, for meaning, hungry for the critical. Strangely, it then returns, just hungry for food. Stories come and go, ephemeral. People come and go, burst in and out. Peoples come and go. We are ephemeral. Empires come and go. The Ming, the Romans, the Incas. Now, why did Mesopotamia fall? Different timescales, bubbles and empires. Anyway, what did the Romans ever do for us? Oh, aqueducts, plumbing, underfloor heating, poetry, rhetoric, the Senate, Latin. Okay. Then what did the Chinese ever do for us? Well, paper, gunpowder, silk, tea, porcelain, noodles, fireworks, the compass, apricots. Okay, cool. Oh, and the caliphates. Well, arithmetic, algebra. Okay, let's move on. The trouble with sentience is a realization of our own impermanence. We don't want to go. And we realize we don't want to go. We draw in sand, carve our names in stone. Ideas get complex, ink on paper, in books. We grow to learn. We live to learn, to grow, to create, to critique, bubbles, stories. So complex. We take decades of learning, our whole lives, to simply see our impermanence, to see our complexifying of all, poetry, kinships, war, football. We love complexity. We love predictability and pattern. Pattern in sound is music. Pattern in colour on canvas is art. Pattern in thought is the critical. Thoughts burst into consciousness, almost formed, bubbling out of that once seen, the pre-reflexive. Pushed together we desire meaning-making. Thoughts unwanted, unwelcome, enticed, despised, too manipulated they burst, held delicately. They grow, scare, please, inspire, ennoble. Rhizomic, hidden roots, hidden connections. We are often self-amazed from where they sprout. The separate memes we took in over decades mingled down there in the rhizosphere, the ethnographic, the self, the critical, the critic, the loves, the random, the outsprouts, the nova memes. So frustrating were those, my best ideas. The ones lost when the bubble burst. They seemed so genius when I was just waking, a delicate meme floating in beauty. Either that was genius, burst when touched, or Was it my years in training critic awoken who then laughed at the pretentiousness of my half-sleep? A critical frame, a bubble in time, space and human mind, a mythical narrative bubble. 'Tis existentialist, ethnographic, autoethnographic and bubbly. But my meme bubble bursts and is lost before captured on paper or keystrokes. But surely keystrokes are far more ephemeral than ink and paper. But keystrokes are surely cached in the cloud, bubbles on a memory chip, pseudo-fixed, indestructible once thought, continuously renewed, copied, like blockchain. 'Tis gossip thought true simply through repetition. So gossip is thought true simply through repetition. I add more bubble mix, desperate for rainbowy bubbles, excitement, stimuli, ideas, memes. So happy it happened. Beauty in impermanence is in ephemera. In cherry blossom, the rainbows and bubbles, the colours of a sunset changing, unable to be captured in memory in pictures, the absolutely mind-blowingness of a solar eclipse, a storm. Our love, a bubble in time. You smile, our bubble has a rainbow in it. An idea that arouses the enthusiastic debate, a roll in the hay, afternoon delight, petit mort. We need to learn from and be inspired to act at many different time scales at once. The geological, climate change, we can impact on that. Thinking on humanity, the civilization of cousin Earth, will to power has been so problematic. Pivot to will to knowledge and will to agency for all. Incongruities once seen can't be unseen. Once we see the emperor is actually naked, the sudden release of tension may lead to laughter, but on reflection leads to analysis, understanding the need for social change, and to imagine the as yet undreamed utopias. I hear the bees are disappearing. Have they fled to the far side of the moon? What is coming for cousin Earth? All my cousins, sun, wind, slime molds, trees, flowers, wombats and wedge-tailed eagles. I worry for them all. I dream a hierarchy of becoming beyond the necessities for all, steps to the healthy, physical, social, psychological and spiritual, then steps upward, agency, knowledge and rightfully due to all, making our lives works of art, the aesthetic. One day I saw it. People created gender, its rules arbitrary. I grew to see that cultural limits are mere mists. The cage is unlocked, the choices are mine. Tomboy femme, maiden matriarch, and the as yet undreamed of. A room of my own and friends. Privacy, separatism and cooperation. Having recognition as a peer in the social world. Having a perceived to be normal gendered life and yet transcending. Will to knowledge, will to agency, will to beauty. The will to become my own true self. I live to journey, energized by questions unanswered. Comfortable in my own skin, head and heart are friends. Lithe, delicate, uncaged and untamed. I lie on my grassy hill in the sun and stretch. I hardly know what gender is. I hardly know what patriarchy is.
Thank you, Julie. Wonderful, beautiful. I was just resonating with your paddock story of a few years ago. It's just beautiful lyrical work that you put together for us today. I can't wait to see what's next for you, Jewel.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay, and then let's turn it over to Paris.
Hi, please welcome our next presenter, Dr. Higgins, joining us all the way from the School of Concrete Future Studies at the Institute of Forward Thinking in Alexandria. Dr. Higgins is the world leader in futurology-focused scientific fictocritical post-human autoethnography through the lens of micro-community transactional realities in times of non-normative transformative potentialities. It is such a privilege to have you here, Dr. Higgins. I believe you've prepared a demonstration for us today. Fantastic. Take it away, Dr. Higgins. Sorry, was that the scientific fictocritical part or the non-normative transformation? Oh, I see. Could you do that again for us? Was that really post-human autoethnography? And you're definitely the world expert? You are Dr. Higgins, yes? You're not? But you are an expert, right? In critical autoethnography. Could you show us again?
Hi. Hello. That was a bit silly. This is my first conference. Probably a silly way to start a presentation. I'm in my bedroom. A bit personal. Shouldn't show you all the dirty washing. A bit vulnerable. I'm a bit overwhelmed by all this. A bit baffled by a lot of what I've seen the last 2 days. I'm very much a baby academic, so I've kind of just been like, for a lot of it. I was doing this online clowning course a few weeks ago with a teacher based in Melbourne, Damien Warren Smith, better known as his clowning persona, Gary Starr. Damo was talking about bafflement and this idea of finding your personal point of bafflement. He described it as the feeling of when someone is describing something really, really complicated to the person next to you. If you're the one hearing the complex thing, you're performing, understanding, and listening, yes. But if it's been said to the person next to you, when we had our first lockdown last year, before masks were commonplace, I started doing what I've been calling my clown walks. I live near a great little walking trail, and so I would go for a walk dressed in my most pink and bouncy clown costume, because somehow pink clown feels less fun to practice my clowning, because I am very much a baby clown, just trying my best. But, oh, apparently my internet is unstable. Can you all hear me? Hopefully. But the responses I got from people I walked past were pretty incredible. Little kids would most stare in wonder, some a little bit frightened. Older kids would laugh, teenagers would snicker, men in lycra riding on bikes would avoid eye contact at all costs, which was funnier than anything I could possibly do. I had a few older women thank me, which surprised me. According to Marx, Groucho Marx, that is, clowns work as well as aspirin, but twice as fast. In a time that was and is so confusing and painful for everyone, I found myself drawn to clowning more than ever before. In his seminal text, The Moving Body, Le Corps Poétique, Jacques Lecoq describes the actor in a state of clown as protected by the little red nose, the smallest mask available to performers. Yet despite this protection, when the actor comes on stage wearing a small red nose, their face in a state of openness entirely without defense. Clowning is scary, and I don't mean in the Stephen King kind of way. At the core of clowning is this intense vulnerability. Lecoq believed that we are all clowns. We all think we are beautiful, clever, and strong, whereas we all have our weaknesses, our ridiculous side, which can make people laugh when we allow it to express itself. Clowning is all about being open to your audience. A good clown is incredibly empathetic, so in tune with everything around them, as well as their own experience in that exact moment. Between lockdowns, I went on one of my clown walks and had a very unique encounter. I went out in my pinkest outfit and went for a stroll around a nearby lake. It's a lake that's very popular with kids and families because there's an excellent playground and a cafe and a coffee van. There's a great spot for elderly couples to sit and watch the ducks, a great loop for people to take their dogs around. I was about halfway through my first lap when a man stopped me to say that he liked my pink dress. I said that I liked his blue t-shirt because it reminded me of the sky. He said he liked my red nose, to which I responded, "What red nose? I don't know what you're talking about." He laughed and asked what I did. I said, "Right now I'm walking around a lake, but sometimes I'm doing a PhD." He said, "Oh, really?" and asked if he could walk around the lake with me for a bit. I don't know if I've ever said more than a few sentences to a stranger in public before, but as I walked with Mr. Blue T-shirt for about an hour just doing laps of the lake, he asked what I was doing my PhD in, and I said that I was looking at theatre as a tool to empower teenagers, looking at hope and laughter and ways to make the world a little bit better. I left out the bit about it being queer teenagers because I didn't know for certain that friendly Mr. Blue T-shirt wasn't a homophobe, but he said it sounded like a great thing to study. He told me that when he was younger, he used to say that he wanted to be happy. I said I wanted to be happy. Mr. Blue T-shirt said that he believed that to be happy implies not happy now. It's in comparison to your past, your future, and your present. And to be is something that happens in the future. And because the future can never come and arrive, you will never be happy if you say that you want to be happy one day. I suggested maybe finding happiness. He said, but where is it gone? It's not a physical thing, so how can you find it? What about do happy or am happy? Mr. Blue T-shirt seemed to approve of this do/happy idea. We went on to talk about greed and capitalism and ethics, which is just absolutely not something that would happen if I hadn't been wearing my tiny little red mask. Clowns, like very young children, don't understand anything other than right now. For the most part, they don't think about how they want to be happy because either they are or they're not right now. I've heard clowns joke about not being able to see past the end of their own nose, which I think captures the essence of that pretty well. I was in a Zoom seminar earlier this year with Italian clowning master Giovanni Pusetti, where someone in the group described a clown as the person who sees the cracks in society forming and jumps in and fills them with laughter. And it certainly feels like we've got a lot of cracks forming right now. After the 2012 earthquake in Christchurch, New Zealand, a group of clown doctors were among the first on the scene to support rescue workers as they dealt with the aftermath of the crisis. Rita Noetzel, program manager of Clown Doctors New Zealand, described that it's a situation which is definitely not funny and so no one's going to laugh, but they need that permission to laugh and have a release of all that tension. In preparing this presentation, I've been reading quite a few medical journals, an area that I'm absolutely not familiar with. And I find it so funny to read about clowns in a scientific, medical, psychological perspective, when to me it only makes sense as an embodied feeling. The side effects of laughter are very limited. That's a sentence that I've seen in almost every journal, and I find it so funny. The side effects of laughter are very limited. Medical scientific doctor Ramon Mora-Rappel, MD, goes on to explain that humor, mirth, and laughter have numerous effects involving the muscular, cardiovascular, respiratory, endocrine, immune, and central nervous systems. Over the past few decades, there have been an increasing number of studies on the benefits of clown presences in hospital wards, nursing homes, and refugee camps as a way of bringing relief to those who are suffering. A 2013 study in the UK found that children who had clowns present during a stay in hospital showed an earlier disappearance of pathological symptoms, a statistically significant lowering of diastolic blood pressure and respiratory rate. Children in the intervention group also had a decrease in temperature during their interaction with the clowns, a phenomenon which is hard to explain, meriting further study. A health-enhancing effect of clown presence was also observed on pain parameters, both by self-evaluation and assessment by nurses. How cool is that? I just love clowns. I love clowns. Like, I get why people are scared of them. And yes, I blame Ronald McDonald, but they're so cool. And laughter is so good. Like everyone else my age, I've been playing a lot of online games with my friends lately. We've recently found a new one where you have to draw pictures on your terrible little touchpad mouse thing, and they're always just awful pictures, but gee whiz. I couldn't remember the last time I had laughed so hard that I cried and my stomach hurt. I think we all had to take an emergency bathroom break so we didn't wet our pants from laughing so hard. Haven't had a lot of those moments in the past few years, but in that moment, I forgot there was a pandemic and that I was in lockdown with a curfew and a 5-kilometer bubble that I could be in. There were only the very silly pictures on my screen and the sounds of my friends' laughter. Jose Esteban Munoz describes the here and now as a prison house. I think this is a sentiment that the entire world can relate to after the last almost 2 years. I am a big fan of Munoz, and of all my books, Cruising Utopia is the one that has the most scribbles through its pages. There is a very juicy tension between clowning and queer futurity that I am only just starting to get my little fingers into. I think that the clown hears the here and now as a prison house and says, oh, cool, these bars, what kind of metal do you think that is? Like, I reckon that could be a pretty good instrument. And wow, that window is really high up. But I bet if I pushed everything I had against the wall, I could climb up there and it would be a great view. Maybe I could even grow some flowers in the windowsill. They'd probably fall about 30 times trying to get up to the window and get their head stuck in between the bars. But these limitations are an opportunity for curiosity. The clown knows that they are in a prison. They know that the world is terrible, but they also know that it's fantastic. In his work, The Principle of Hope, Ernst Bloch says that even in the negative, there are unbearable moments of astonishment. Astonishment, like bafflement, is the realm of the clown. Bloch goes on to state that the same cause which produces negative astonishment is capable of producing happiness as the positivism of astonishment. And here the location is always the now, not as a bloody gash in the darkness of the now and what is to be found within it begins to blossom, with positive symbol intention breaking into this darkness. Munoz suggests that queerness is utopian and that there is something queer about the utopian. Frederick Jameson describes the utopian as the oddball or the maniac. I want to suggest that clowning is utopian and that there is something queer about the clown. In The Queer Art of Failure, Jack Halberstam expresses that the queer art of failure involves the acceptance of the embrace of the absurd. This leads up his turn. This reveals his profoundly human nature, which moves us and makes us laugh. As a student, when a clown fails, they're instructed to look at the audience and failure and what it feels like. My internet is unstable again. In my first clowning course, I failed so much. My teacher sat me down and said, some people are actors and some people are clowns. You are an actor, which broke my heart into 1,000,000 tiny little pieces. Clowning for me has been failing and flopping and not being at all funny, and then accidentally being a tiny little bit funny but not knowing how, and then that being the bit that's funny. In that state of having no idea what I'm doing, there is so much space and so much time. The same teacher who told me an actor used to tell our class, go on stage with no ideas, you'll either do something, do nothing. I don't know if anyone's ever been on stage with no idea whatsoever what you're going to do, but those first 10 to 20 seconds are the longest 10, 20 seconds you can possibly experience. The clown has no sense of the future, possibly because their now feels infinite. Bloch suggests that the not yet conscious itself must become conscious in its act, known in its content as the process of dawning on the one hand as what is dawning on the other. And so the point is reached where hope itself, this authentic, expectant emotion in the forward dream, no longer just appears as a merely self-based mental feeling, but in the conscious known utopian function. The clown doesn't conform to straight time because they have no past, and rather live in a state of extended not yet conscious. The clown falls, flops, and fails their way through their infinite present, and in that finds moments of joy, of sadness, of curiosity, and accidental virtuosity that dawn as utopian becoming. Munoz believes that queer utopia is not just a failure to achieve normative virtuosity, it is also a failure that is born in the face of failure within straight time's measure. Lecoq states that the clown doesn't exist aside from the act of performing them. Clowning for me is queer because I am. To show my most vulnerable self is to show my queerness, my neurodiversity, my failing at heteropatriarchal society. But in these moments of weakness, I'm protected by my tiny red mask that allows me to fail without fear, to show off my mess and insecurities and to use them to create something that makes people laugh, and maybe for at least a moment makes their world better. I'm still very much a baby clown and a baby academic and constantly failing at both. But in these moments of failure, I am learning and creating space for new discoveries and potential for a not yet here and now that is better than the current here and now.
That was very good. Oh yes, that was a great first attempt. You should be very proud of yourself. Wait, you are an expert in this, yes? In queer futurity and stuff? Because it didn't really sound like... Are you sure? You're not an expert, are you? Could you show us what it looks like again?
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paris.
I loved it. Thank you. Beautiful.
So fun. So fun. And so I'm sorry about the stable internet, although it was, I agree, Stacey, just some really like perfectly unstable moments in that presentation. So it's serendipity. Oh, thank you so much to all our presenters, to Paris and to Julie and to Michelle. What a great panel. Just we've been, you know, there's so much diversity, but so much beautiful vulnerability and craft in each of these presentations. Maybe I'll turn it over to you all. I don't know if you have questions that you want to ask all of our presenters, each of our presenters. Yeah, and be sure and look in the chat. You're getting all kinds of love there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was for me interesting that there are a couple of themes that recurred between the three pieces, and yeah, I'm sorry, that wasn't enough. And yeah, I'm just so glad to be part of this community where I keep being inspired. I was feeling quite out of it the last month or two because of the project I'm doing with the ABC, and yeah, and this just gives me the inspiration. Hearing so many different voices and so many amazing thoughts, and and just and I found it powerful in the like, for example, in the admitting of not knowing from everybody that because there's heaps I don't know. I think that came across very clearly in what I did, and so it's but just going back to what Chris Poulos was saying yesterday, the running with the flow of the writing, and so I that has been which is a very Taoist thought as well, actually. But I have I do feel when I feel a bit lost, I feel just running with the flow is what I do next.
Yeah, yeah. That's so, it's so true, Julie. And I was really resonating listening to Paris, thinking too of you, some of the beautiful work that you've done, kind of lighting the way a little bit about that kind of journey and the failures and what you learned. If I think back on presentations that you've made and your wonderful book, I think that there's a lot of resonance there. So Paris, I'm going to recommend Julie's book to you. I think you'd really get it.
It's got a very memorable title, Paris. It's a feminist post-transsexual autoethnography on challenging normative gender coercion. Really rolls off the tongue, rolls.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great book. Other comments? Oh, yeah, Emily, you got a hand up, I see.
Yeah, well, firstly, actually, just off the back of that, would you put the link to that book in the chat, Julie, if that's possible?
Okay, cool, I'll find it. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess it's sort of for all three, because I was really affected by all of them, and this is a bit not well articulated yet, but there was something about all of them that had a bit of a next to normal quality, or what's perceived as normal or can be, but there was this beautiful sort of side by side kind of quality I felt to all of them in terms of taking experience and just kind of rendering it next to. And that's kind of what I was getting in a really beautiful way, which to me then gives permission to others to sort of also review their experiences in a way that has more options maybe than sometimes we feel that we're given. So I don't know, I get that. Maybe this is for everyone, just like a question about that, whether there is a sense of that deliberate sort of stepping aside or being next to or looking at things slant when you're, particularly in these presentations, but even in your ongoing practice or your research, if there's something, yeah. So I guess it's sort of a question and an offer, and I just wanted to put it out there. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yes, right. Go for it, Michelle.
This isn't very well articulated either. But in terms of, I think one of the things that in terms of that next to or that alternative, I think I didn't spot it, but I think you're really right, and I can only sort of speak for what I've been trying to do, which is it's a story I often tell my students to make them laugh. But when I first read study theory, I think it was specifically Judith Butler, I got so excited by what I was reading because it was enabling me to think differently. And I was really excited, but I was in an open plan office, so I couldn't really do anything. So I tore off a bit of the page and ate it. And then I just kind of stood there feeling a bit stupid. But for me, what that's enabled me to do is not only talk differently about the kind of theory that you find on a page, but actually thinking about how that is something that you can do and rethink your own experiences. In mental health, mental illness and stuff, you often get categorized or told things about who you are or what you like. And the risk is that if you reject that, you need the help in a lot of cases, you really do. And I've been lucky to have some really great support, but at the same time, there's a risk if you don't take things on, then you won't get the help, but some of those things are really damaging. And so theory has been another way to reconceptualize very slowly, inch by inch, to reframe things. And I actually wrote the last section of my paper, I think this morning, from stuff that I've heard over the last sort of day and a bit, which instead of thinking in this binary of either we translate experience and we rub it out, or we don't translate experiences, if we actually believe that language is constitutive, then there is the possibility of creating something different. But I can only often see that in contrast, to take it back to that next to. I've got to place it next to what's already there and then take a look at it. And that's sort of what I'm trying to do in writing. I'm not sure how successfully, but I am trying. So, yeah, thank you for that comment, Emily.
To give my perspective on that question as well, I think for me it's very conscious that my work sits kind of alongside or outside of whatever areas I'm in, I guess. Partly because I'm using queer theory, which goes against things, as well as I feel like I'm very new to academics as well as autoethnography, but it feels like autoethnography by its nature goes against the historical assumptions of academics. And I feel like from a kind of theoretical look at my work, it's going against kind of traditions, but I am also non-binary and neurodiverse and have a number of chronic health conditions, and a lot of my work is about making space and amplifying the voices of those who might not be catered to and might not have the world built for them. And so I think I am very deliberately in a space of outside of or next to. Yeah.
Great, thank you. That's amazing. Yeah.
Julie, do you want to speak to that at all, about that kind of adjacent or next to-ness?
So could you ask again? Sorry, because it didn't quite click with me.
Yeah, it was very unclear. I think actually how Michelle put it in terms of reframing is probably the most useful. It's like taking something we expect to see in one frame and sort of just putting a different frame around it. Although your next to is so beautifully illustrated too with the lava lamps that are next to you. Maybe that was why it's like putting things together we don't always expect to see together. Maybe that's part of what I was getting to from all of you, like ideas as well as visual things.
I guess from that point of view, I guess it feels like my whole life has been not what I expected. It just keeps changing, and so I've developed an openness to that now, which is, rather than be scared of it, I just go, oh, that's interesting. I'm doing that now. That I did not expect that. See, my next crazy idea is I had a practice with CAE a few years ago, was to turn my PhD into a cabaret. I thought that would be a bit of a fun thing to do.
Yes, we're all there. We're all there, Julie. Just say the word. We are, in fact, the people on the screen, many of them, big cabaret lovers, I think. So we'll be there with bells or noses on, as it were. Great. Any other comments or questions for these amazing panelists?
I find them very hypnotic. I just have to watch the bubbles.
They're really great on a Zoom, Julia. I think I'm going to have to invest in a lava lamp for myself. They're really amazing. They're really amazing. I wonder, this is an unformed thought too, and I'm just riffing on Michelle, just that image of you sort of consuming, something, in this moment of excitement, and wanting it in you. and with you in that kind of metabolic way. And I wonder, I mean, I see it across all of these presentations, you know, the things that not only do we carry with us, but that, you know, they become part of us, part of our DNA. And I wonder if that resonates with you as panelists. So we've got a lot of kind of spatial metaphors going on here. I love that adjacency and the reframing, but also that kind of metabolizing. And whether you think that, I'm just thinking of critiques of ethnography, that kind of the colonial project of ethnography, and the idea of you know, and you know, food tourism, and the critique of eating the other, quote unquote. And I just wonder if there's something here about reframing through critical autoethnography, that kind of metabolic process. And I don't know. I just love to hear what the panelists have to say, but maybe the rest of you too. It's been something I've been thinking about for a while. And also maybe I'm hungry.
Well, I did.
You go, Julie.
I did talk about being hungry quite a few times during that piece, but hungry for ideas, but then hungry for food as well. Sorry, talking too fast. So my undergrad degree was a biology major, so I go very literal, as you mentioned, was metabolism.
I can add to that a little bit.
Thank you.
In terms of, I think, I guess for me, how I've sort of started to think about it is, and I've always been quite a weirdly pragmatic, yet also not sort of person, where I don't have a lot of patience if you're writing about something or you're thinking about something, to not try and actually make that somehow in the real world. And I guess, and from when I was really, really young, like 12, 14, I don't know, 12 something, I've been trying to figure out how to think about the world. And it wasn't until I I got sort of into Butler and a few other bits of theory. And so for me, though, that theory was something that I wanted to use and sort of be a part of how I thought. And I've always thought about theory allows you to think around corners. And, you know, and it's about, and someone once told me you can't actually create change until you can imagine what that change might look like. And so theory for me is a way for me to think differently about the world. And so in terms of that kind of that consumption, it was just, for me, that particular moment, I didn't know what else to do. Like, if I hadn't been in an open plan office, I might have just done like a really fast lap around, like possibly while doing this with my arms. But you can't do that at a university often. So for me, that was just about a way to try and contain that feeling and that excitement. And also when you've been, so for example, depressed for a really long time and something breaks through that actually makes you feel something and excited, hanging on to that and figuring out how a way to do that again and again was something that theory actually really gave me. So that's how that's how I started to that's how I've begun to really think about it. And then coming to like autoethnography, especially critical autoethnography, has for me sort of a way to start to weave those things together into something that I hope is generative. So maybe I'm just really weird. I used to eat books when I was little, so maybe that's just a habit.
That's great. Another great metaphor, you know, theory lets us see around corners. I just really love that. I love that idea. Yeah. And that eating the other, that's bell hooks. I don't know, that looks like a pirated university course PDF upload I've popped into the chat. So anyway, yeah, that's what I was thinking of when I was kind of blabbing there a moment ago. I'm mindful of the time. I want to thank all of our panelists, and just, you know, it was just such another just amazing session. They just keep coming, don't they? And I also, I've been boring people with this all day, but I'll remind, if we've got new folks joining us, that tonight's keynote and then a little special treat afterwards are going to happen on YouTube. We will use the Zoom after the keynote to have a chat. So go to YouTube at 7. I'm talking about Melbourne time, and have a look at what Katrina and David have put together for us. But that's not for a while. Right now it's 5. And so hop into Zoom room 1. We have a big treat. So Tessa Wyatt, who's a beautiful visual artist in Scotland, has a bubble making activity for us. And so she's put a little bit of a recipe and some materials on that Facebook group. I've already got our bubble mixture ready to go in the kitchen. So I hope I'll see you over there. It's going to be a great session with Tess. And who, I don't know, I mean, she's a wonderful person all on her own, but she's also the wonderful partner of Jonathan Wyatt. So it'll be good to have our Scottish friends with us. So we'll see you in that session. And then we have one more paper session from 6 to 7. All right.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Everybody, bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.